All right. Hopefully this class will go a little quicker than usual. Last week we ended at Monday I ended on about 8:45ish, but that's because we went over some midterm stuff. Um, you guys tend to go a little faster than the Monday class, so that might work out in your favor. We might be out of here at 8:30, maybe 8:15. That'd be nice. So next week you guys have a midterm. The Monday class gets to miss the midterm and has to take it when they come back because Family Day falls on Monday. So you guys don't come to school on Monday if you didn't know that. Because it's Family Day. And then the following week, you guys are on reading week, right? So you get a week off to, regroup and de-stress depending on your instructors and what kind of assignments they've given you over the reading week, right? So hopefully nothing too much. So anyways, we'll talk a little bit about the midterm because you guys will have it next week. Essentially, it's going to be only a practical, okay? It's 3 hours long. You have 3 hours to complete the practical. Basically, what will happen is you'll come in. I'm going to give you an address to go to. You're going to enter your student ID and your email address, and then a test for you, specifically for you, that is unique to you, will be distributed to you. And then you will go through and answer the questions. It'll be the same as the labs. So little IDE windows. You type out your answer in the little IDE window. There might be some hinting to kind of help you a little bit with your question, and then you move on to the next question. All of your answers will be stored into your local storage, so if you do have to refresh your page, it's not a big deal. They'll also be in a database, so you can always get your tests back. But the big part about it is it will help me with marking your tests because it will create a faster turnaround time, right? Because I'll obviously in the back end going to build an application that will mark it for me, 90% of it for me. So things should go quickly. That being said, though, obviously if you fail a question, I'll go check it and make sure that it's not a me error and that it is a you error. So that kind of stuff. But it should make things a lot faster, and you should get your test back within 2 to 3 days after you actually take it, which will be nice because that doesn't usually happen. Okay, cool. So that will be next week. Midterm starts, I say 3 hours, but you don't actually get 3 hours because we have to be out of here by 10:02. No, wait. No, there's no class after you guys. No, you can have the full 3 hours. Yeah, so show up on time. You know what? If you're early, like 10 minutes early, I'll start at 10 minutes early if I can get in here. But yeah, so cool. Any questions about the midterm for next week? No? You guys already done some this week? Have you done some midterms already? No? Oh, that's cool. All right, let's talk about what we did last week. Last week, we talked about the very difficult topic of object inheritance in JavaScript. We had a discussion about passing by value versus passing by reference, right? The easiest way to remember it is the primitives are all passed by value. The primitives are booleans, numbers, strings, and what were the other two? There's two kind of obscure ones that are both primitives. Undefined is one of them? Null is the other one. So those 5, they're passed by value. Passed by reference will be objects and arrays are all passed by reference. Functions are also passed by reference if they're named. They are passed by reference as well. The difference between pass by value and pass by reference is pass by value will actually create a new location in memory and store a copy of whatever the value is in memory. Okay? Whereas pass by reference will create a reference pointer to that position in memory and store that in your new variable. Which means anytime you try to access anything from that variable, all you're doing is going to that address location and accessing that value that's currently inside that address location. Right? The big important factor to remember about pass by reference comes more into play when we start playing around with the DOM because everything is a reference to everything inside the DOM, and understanding that will help you be able to manipulate and work with the DOM a lot better. So it's definitely a valuable thing to know. There's a couple of little diagrams in here to show you what that looks like. There may be a question on the test about pass by value and pass by reference. I don't know yet. It's not Saturday and I haven't started writing it, so we'll talk about it then. All right, we talked about inheritance using object literals. Using object literals requires us to kind of change our method of thinking because we have to kind of architect our own initializer. It's not a constructor, right? So constructors get called automatically when you construct the object. You guys should know that from Java. However, this is not a constructor. It's a method that you have to call. You would actually have to initialize it and fire it off. But even constructors in JavaScript work that way anyways, because you actually can optionally create an object in JavaScript without actually calling the constructor. That's totally doable as well. So this is just a different kind of paradigm when it comes to working with object inheritance with literals. Some people prefer this over working with object constructors just because it's simplistic. It is fast. It's cool to code that way, but there's a lot more power with working with object constructors and learning how to use prototype. There's a lot more power there. In fact, we're actually going to do something cool today. Remember how I told you everything inside JavaScript can be manipulated by you? You can change it and modify it. We're actually going to take a built-in API method and we're going to modify it so that it works for us and does something particular for us. Don't get nervous. It'll be step by step. It'll go fairly easily. All right. Then we talked about inheritance using object create, which is how we actually get inheritance using the object literals. Object create will create a reference point and store it in the proto for that particular object. And then when we go to access certain details about that object, for example, if I go to access object inherit.a, I will get the value of 1 back because of that inheritance between object inherit and object. And that's all done through object create. Where are we here? We created some food. And then we did the object constructors. Probably the most confusing thing I would say is inheritance using object constructors because there's a few steps that you have to complete in order to do it. Like for example, let me find the actual example here. This big thing. Oh, is that the one? No. Next one. There it is. So in order to inherit person, we have to actually, inside our employee constructor, we have to call person, which will actually call the constructor on that. We assign this to it, which literally binds person to our employee. And then we pass in what its constructor requires as parameters, which is name and age. And then our second step is to assign the prototype, the person prototype. So this is the same as us when we create the object literals. When we do inheritance with object literals, this is the same statement. The only difference is now we're doing it with the prototype method. We're actually assigning the reference point for that prototype to this prototype. And the reason we do that is because any methods or properties that are assigned to the prototype property of person will now be referable through employee. That's the reason why we do it. It's confusing. I get it. Just bookmark this page, keep track of it for the test so that you know how to create one. All right. Cool. And then we created a new object. Somewhere we did. And we talked a little bit about composition, but you don't need to concern yourself with that, except for be aware of it, watch the video. It won't be on the test, though. I won't get you to do any object compositions on the test, okay? Just be aware of that paradigm and that it exists. Cool. Any questions about last week's lesson? No? Nice. So we're rocking along, which is kind of nice because we're going to be now into the DOM, which, I mean, that's the biggest reason why we want to play around with JavaScript in the first place, is being able to manipulate our pages, our HTML. JavaScript is, it does that very, very well. You actually have two choices for client-side scripting. You can do VB script directly in the browser, if you know it, or you can use JavaScript. And JavaScript obviously is the one of choice for most people. It's the one that has the most amount of information out there. It's pretty easy to learn, though VB script isn't that bad. Plus, if you learn VB script, then you can manipulate Excel documents and Word documents and stuff like that, because that's their programming language of choice. So what is the DOM? The DOM is the Document Object Model. So essentially what it is it's your entire HTML page objectified. It's a representation, an object representation of your HTML page. When you look at an HTML page, I'm not sure how often you guys have done this, but if you right-click on them and choose View Page Source, you get the HTML that actually constructs the page, right? Starts off with this opening tag up here, HTML. That has a closing tag at the very bottom of the page. If we scroll all the way down, there's the closing, right, on line 793. We have a head, which contains all of our metadata, our scripts, our links, anything that we basically need to execute before the page loads. That happens in there. Then we have our body tag. Our body tag basically encapsulates our document, essentially, what we're going to show the user, right? All the information that we want to actually semantically encapsulate for them. Then we have little tags in here that represent different aspects of our page. A div, which usually represents a container of some sort. We have a header, which basically tells the browser that this is a header section, so likely going to contain a title. We have article, which is one of the HTML5 tags. Article basically will tell the browser that this section is an article. That actually has more semantic value to screen readers, any accessibility devices, stuff like that. It also has semantic value to search engines like Google and stuff, because they use that to be able to tell, you know, this is a blog, this is an article, this is a news article, this is a video, this is an image, stuff like that. It gives them meaning behind what you're actually writing, which makes sense because computers are literal, right? So this helps provide semantic, that's a key word there, semantic value to what those things are. Does anybody know what HTML is? Like what language it's a root from? It's based on a language. It's based on a data architecture language. XML? Yes, it's based on XML. So if you've written HTML, you have technically written XML as well. XML is used for the same purpose. It's used to describe data. That's its purpose, right? What do we replace XML now with? What is more common? Yeah, JSON. JSON is much more common than XML. In week 11 or so, we will be doing some JSON stuff, so you'll get used to that. Anyways, when we load our browser, whether it's Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Opera, Composer, whatever it is you happen to be loading, this whole page that you see here will get converted by the JavaScript engine, or actually not even by the JavaScript engine, by the browser itself, will get converted into something called a DOM, a Document Object Model. The DOM, basically what it is when it's done, is just a gigantic object with referential points to each of the HTML tags inside your page. So there is a reference point to the div that I pointed out. There's a reference point to the article. There's a reference point to the header. And you can access those like properties on an object, which is really cool. In addition to that, not only can you just access the tag, you can also change its styling. You can change the text content inside of it. You can change its location. You can move it around the page. You can even animate it if you wanted to. You have control over all that because you're using a programming language now to be able to interact with your actual HTML page. So, just incidentally, the DOM is a standard more than anything else. It's not exclusive to JavaScript. The DOM is not just for JavaScript. VB Script, for example, can manipulate the DOM as well. There's another language that actually interacts with the DOM API also that you already know because you guys took a class in it. Does anybody know what it is? Think about presentation. CSS. Yeah, CSS actually interacts with your DOM hierarchy, right? Uses that same DOM API. And that's important to understand because we're actually going to utilize your knowledge in CSS today in order to select and grab elements off our page using the same CSS you guys already know. Okay? Cool. So understanding the DOM structure will allow you to manipulate it with a programming language like JavaScript more effectively. The DOM, however, is not explicitly a JavaScript thing. It was made to be independent of any programming language. Almost all programming languages that have some sort of net capability or can have a library extend and become net capable has a DOM library somewhere, right? So that includes languages like C++, right? That's pretty like mid-level. Languages like Ruby, obviously, PHP, Java, ASP.NET. All of these languages do have usually a DOM library. Sometimes it might have to be installed. Sometimes it is native to the language. It varies. But they give you ways to be able to interact with the DOM in different ways. All right, so this thing here is just a click execute, which is nice, right? You don't actually have to type anything. But let me break it down what we're actually doing in here. Const. Const signifies what? The variable must be...
It's immutable.
Exactly. It's immutable and it is constant, right? It's never going to change. And that is very relevant in this scenario because what we're doing here is we're accessing our document, which is our DOM. That is our DOM. And a nice handy little keyword that you have available to you at all times. Okay? Document represents the whole DOM. And actually, if you were to spit out document, if you were to come over here and type in console.log document, you'll get this little arrow. If you click the arrow, there you go. There's the HTML, there's the head, there's the body, there's all of our tags in there, right? Now, that's not the prettiest way to see it, though, because that is just HTML. Let's take a look at it as an object. We'll type in dir document, and that will give us the actual DOM object with all of its properties that are attached to it. Now, if I want to see the children of the DOM, so my HTML, right, what I can do is I can actually go access the children nodes. There's two. I can either do HTML collection or node list. Either one is fine. And there you go. You can see there's our document HTML. There's the HTML page. Notice when I hover over it, everything turns blue to show that it's selected, right? I can come in here and go to these child nodes. There's the head, the text, there's the body. I can just keep doing this. There's the div layer, right? There's a bunch of these little text and script tags here. I want to see if I can find this particular one. There's our article right there. And you can just keep moving your way down. And these aren't copied over each time, right? When you create a reference to it, this document.query selector, hi, when we pass that into const, it's actually selecting, this isn't hi, it's h1. It's selecting the h1 element on the page, and it's copying over a reference to that object, right? So it's not like I'm taking the h1 on the page and creating a duplicate of it and then putting that into memory. Because if I did that, this page would get really slow really fast, right? Because we just create copies and copies and copies. That's terrible. That's why we use objects by reference, and that's why the DOM is only by reference, because you don't need multiple copies of your HTML page. It's not changing. You're not going to modify it, and if you do modify it, you're going to use JavaScript to do any modifications you're going to do. But the actual DOM hierarchy will always stay the way it is, right? Those references will always exist unless you remove them. And you have the ability to do that. But you're not actually manipulating your index.html page, not physically at least. You're not going in and modifying that with JavaScript. When you're done and you're like, cool, I've done all these crazy things, now I want to get rid of them, refresh, page is back, everything's great, right? And that leads to the fact that the reason why that is because our browser is stateless. Our browser will not maintain state. Meaning when we make changes or we modify documents or we do anything inside here with JavaScript, it's not going to stick around. The second you refresh, it's gone. Now there are ways to get it to kind of stick around. You can use cookies. You can use local storage, right? You can use, there's like a SQLite in some browsers. They support SQLite, which is like a really low level database of just key value pairs. They do have things like that for creating storage solutions. The problem is they're not reliable because a user can shut those things off. They have the ability to shut them off. They also have the ability to create a permission set saying, in order for you to write to my local storage, you have to ask permission. Or in order for you to create a cookie on my machine, you have to ask permission. They can increase their security settings to create those type of issues. So because of that, the whole idea of trying to make the front end of your browser, the client side of your browser, stateful is a lost cause. You're not going to be able to do that or rely on it. So you need to remember that when you're building out your architectures. So we have const h1 equals document.query selector h1. So what's going to happen is we're going to start at document, right? There we go. We're at the document. Query selector is like a search algorithm, right? That's already been rewritten. That's been already written for you. I don't know what type of search algorithm is under the hood. Probably an indexing type version. Essentially, what you're going to do is when you type in the H1 here, right? That is a CSS selector string. So think about all the CSS selection strings you guys already know, right? You know how to select by class. You know how to select by tags. You know how to select by IDs. You've already done that. You can actually take that knowledge and pass it in as your argument into the query selector and use that to be able to select elements on the page. Okay? So that's essentially what's happening here. Document.query selector. Query selector says to the document, hey, within the scope of you, where is this H1? Find that H1 and return it to me. So that's exactly what's going to happen. It's going to go, hey, where's the H1? It's going to scan through. It's going to check in the HTML. Nope. It's going to check in the body. Okay, getting a little closer. It's going to check in the head. Or header, sorry. Yeah, and then it's going to find it here. And it's going to return it back. There we go. And it's going to store the reference into our H1 variable. Now we have access to this particular HTML element on our page. And for those of you that are curious what this H1 is actually representing, it's representing this big thing up here where it says introducing the DOM. That's what that's going to represent. So now that we have the H1, like any object, it has properties and methods available to it. One of the very common properties is style, which is literally an access point to all of the CSS available on that object. So think about all the CSS you know, right? All the different things you can modify and change on an HTML element. You can now access that through a property called style, right? So you access property style, and then you access color. What will color change? The color of what? The text, exactly. Not the background color, the color of the text, right? In addition, we can also actually modify the content inside that element. We can modify either the HTML inside of it, or we can modify the raw text node that's sitting inside there. And we can do that by accessing its text content. When we access the text content and change whatever that is, we modify its text inside. So if you want, go ahead, change that color to whatever color you want. Right? I'm going to leave mine as pink. Make it aqua, make it a hex, right? If you want to use a hex, you can. I don't know if I showed you guys this, but there's a website called flatuicolors.com. Very, very cool website. Tons of different palettes on here from all over the world. I was actually using this today, the Canadian one. I used Jigglypuff. Thought it was a nice color. I'm going to use it now, actually. Let's copy Jigglypuff. I'm going to replace it in there. And you can call it hackety hack if you want, or call it whatever you want. When you're done, go ahead and click execute. And it should modify the H1 for you. All right. Out of curiosity, does anybody get my console message? No? All right. What's that? Kinda. It's from a show back from like the 60s, and then now as well. Well, not now, 90s they redid it. It's called Outer Limits. It's like a, no? Do any of you have the sci-fi class this year? Yeah? Are you guys watching the Outer Limits episode? Oh, right, because Buddy took off. Yeah. Yeah. They tend to show it in that class.
Who's this Buddy?
Jerry. He's a very interesting fellow. All right, so we can control different aspects of our actual HTML by accessing our properties, the style property, the text content property. But I mean, we're not limited there. There are so many properties available. And if we want to see what properties we actually have access to, all we have to do is type in console.dir. If you're on Chrome, you need to type dir. If you're on Firefox, you're fine. It just spits it out properly. But if you're on Chrome, you need to type dir. Type in your variable there. Hit execute, and you'll get your little drop-down arrow. And these are all the properties that it has. And keep in mind that it's not limited to these, right? Because it gets more properties through inheritance. So if you were to scroll all the way to the very bottom, you'll notice there's the proto method, which we talked about last week, which is how inheritance is transferred over, right? And it's inheriting from this HTML heading element. Cool, so if you click that arrow, you can see that there's a whole bunch of properties there as well. And whatever properties RH1 is not overriding, it's gaining access to those properties as well. And you'll notice there's another proto element there. And this one is called HTML element. Click that, same thing, tons and tons and tons of properties till you get to the bottom. And you get element. Element inherits from node. Node inherits from the event target, which we're going to talk about in 2 weeks. That's probably the funnest part, I think. And event target, like all objects in JavaScript, inherit from the base object, right? Which leads me into the next topic, our DOM types. So below this is a table that illustrates our actual many DOM-related objects that you're going to encounter while working with the DOM. Each one of these is responsible for their own things, but there's some commonality. For example, HTML element, right? Every single HTML element on the page inherits from HTML element. Okay? That's really important to understand. Every single element on the page will inherit from the HTML element object. Okay? They might have their own version of themselves, right? Like for example, our H1, if I always do that, Command K. If I take our H1, I'm just going to go constructor.name, and that should return back. Did I spell it wrong? Oh, right, because I don't have my H1 defined. That's fine. We can go ahead and grab it. Document.query selector. H1. Okay, so there's my H1 constructor.name. This is the object type that it is. It's an HTML heading element. The body tag will be an HTML body element. An image tag will be an HTML image element. Okay, so they are different based on their tag type, but they all, every single one of them, inherits from HTML element. And incidentally, you can check that. We can select our object, use the operator instance of, and compare it to another object. And you can see it's true, because it inherits from that actual object. So it's the thing that's going to provide us with an interface for basically all of our things that we need. Our selectors, our querying capabilities, all of our movement or navigation, all that. It's the thing that contains all of those things that we need. It's what's basically encapsulating all these other objects for us. So element is extremely important because element is what's going to give us our element level navigation. It will allow us to move up and down through children and through parents. It will allow us to move through siblings, basically move around our document. Node also provides us with the core tree that allows us to basically create our inheritance chain, right? Event target, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks, is basically what we're going to use to be able to track things like click events, hovers, all those type of functionality, so we can do, some interactive stuff with our user. And then the other one that you're going to come across is a node list, and we'll be talking about this today. An HTML element is a singular element. It is one element. It is representation of one element on your page. Whereas a node list is a collection of HTML elements. Okay? Think of it like an array. It's not an array, but think of it like an array. It's the same kind of idea, same kind of architecture. This image here is an example of how the hierarchy actually works. Event target starting at the top. There is an object above the event target, though. Event target leads into node. All of our different HTML elements, such as text, element, and comment, come off node. Element extends from HTML element, and that's where we get into HTML input element, our body elements, and our anchor elements. And no, I don't expect you to remember this hierarchy. Not even a little bit. I mean, I have to look it up every time I want to remember it. All right, another just click execute. This time, I'm actually query selecting the body. So that's going to return back the whole body element. For some reason, I'm storing it in a variable called h1, which is a bit weird, but whatever. And then I'm console during it out. And this basically shows that same proto-inheritance that I was talking about before. We are outputting the body tag. That's a spelling error there. We've selected from the DOM. If you click the icon beside the tag, you will see a list of properties available to it. However, if you remember from last week, inheritance can be seen through the proto property, right? So if you want to see what your object is inheriting from, look at the proto property. Scroll the proto tag and open it and follow through each proto tag to see the inheritance chain for the body element. All right, so here I've given you a randomized list, and you're going to sort it. You're going to sort it by dragging it and dropping it. Cool, eh? That's done with JavaScript. So go ahead and sort that in the order that it goes in. And just to give you a hint, object goes to the very bottom. Hello, Connor.
Hey, Sean.
How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Not too bad.
How are things? How's the
Good.
first half of your week? I don't know. I wasn't there.
It's been okay. I mean, today was pretty lonely, considering I was all by myself all day, but
Really?
yeah.
Daryl was there.
Daryl was there, but he had his headphones on all day. Yeah. It's just me.
I should know that Sean gets fully at work.
Yeah.
Are you actually?
Do I actually get lonely at work? Yeah, it's a long ass day.
Enough to get through.
Yeah, exactly. It's 9 hours of nobody to talk to.
Sean, you can just give me a call.
I'll take you up on that. All right, let's see how far you guys got. What's the first element that we're going to, what's the first object?
Object.
No.
No?
No, object's at the bottom.
No, that would make sense if you had.
What is it? No, not node.
Element body, HTML body element.
There you go. HTML body element. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't let you drag it to the top. You have to drag one underneath it. All right, what's next after that? Yes, HTML element. That's pretty easy. Cool. After that?
Element.
Element. After element?
Node.
Yep. Now you got it. And then event target, and then object. If you click execute, should say passed. Yep, mine says passed. Yours should say passed.
Yeah.
So that shows you the hierarchy. Like I said, the hierarchy is not super important. The big thing to understand is that HTML elements will contain the tag that you're working with, right? That's going to be your representation of whatever it is you're working with. The element node are responsible for navigation through your element. They're also responsible for query selecting elements, right? So they're what's providing you the ability to query select an element. And then the event target is what's going to give you event bindings to your actual elements. So on click, on focus, on blur, hover, double click. There's tons of them. And you can make up your own as well. You can actually create your own type of events if you so choose. All right, let's talk about DOM selection methods. So we've already used one. Query selector is a DOM selection method. And query selector all is the other DOM selection method that we use. There are 3 other DOM selection methods, and they are get element by ID, get elements by tag, and get elements by class name. These three methods, though they're not deprecated yet, should be. Because there's some issues with those 3 selectors. 1, get element by ID returns a singular element, but get elements by class name and get elements by tag return HTML collections. Okay? Not node lists, HTML collections. And HTML collections are not simple to work with. You can use a for loop to iterate through them, but you can't use for each loops to iterate through them. They're kind of janky, right? And not to mention, it's like IE8, right? That old thing from way long time ago, right? Query selector has been around since IE9 and up, which means that's what we should be using. We should be using query selector and query selector all. It's stable, it's reliable, right? Because query selector will always return an HTML element, even if you select a class name, even if you select a tag that has multiples of it, it will always return one element, not more, just one. It will return the first instance that it finds. Totally reliable. And query selector all, even if it only selects one element on the page, will always return a node list. It'll never return something else. So query selector will always return an HTML element, and query selector all will always return a node list. And that's important to understand that kind of reliability is something you strive for as a programmer. You want consistency from your methods. You don't want something returning an oddity, right? Because it makes it harder to do things that you want to do. And those 3 other methods, get element by tag, get elements by class name, and get elements, I screwed that up. But those other 3, because they're not reliable, it's a lot harder to do more dynamic programming, more meta-based programming with those, all right? Anyways, you guys are going to use query selector and query selector all while you're doing stuff with me, so you'll get fully used to them. Plus, to be honest with you, they are so easy because all you need to know in order to make a query is CSS selectors, which you guys already know, right? Or you can learn in about an hour in an afternoon. Like, they're not hard to learn. All right, cool. HTML elements are the tags that make up your HTML document. The DOM API creates HTML element objects that represent and interact with those tags. The selectors allow us to search for the HTML elements that correspond to a tag. The best part is we use CSS selectors as search parameters to retrieve the HTML element objects. The 2 standard methods for selecting HTML elements are document.querySelector and document.querySelectorAll. And that's not entirely accurate. The 2 methods we use are querySelector and querySelectorAll. Document just happens to be one of the things you can search on. Once you've retrieved back an HTML element, you can also call querySelector on that, and it will search within the scope of that. Okay? So you're not limited to just searching with document. All right. These methods, while similar, return different results. Query selector will return a single HTML element object, whereas the document.querySelectorAll will return a node list, which will contain one or more HTML elements. Both DOM selector methods take a single argument, a CSS selector string. These are the same selectors you use to write CSS styles. These selector strings help the method search and find what HTML element you're attempting to select. So here is an example of what each of those looks like. So here we're selecting a tag. We're selecting the paragraph tag on the page. Now, obviously, you will have multiple paragraphs on a page, but query selector will only return one. It'll return the first instance it finds of that tag. So the second it finds it, that's what you're getting back. You will not get any other ones after that point, only that one. If you want all the paragraphs on the page, you have to use query selector all. Okay? This next one is returning back a element that has a class called content, right? .content. Remember this kind of syntax for selecting CSS class, right? This one here might be new to you. It was new to the Monday class. They had never seen that before. That is selecting an element by an attribute, right? So you can select by data or any element that contains the attribute data or the attribute, in this scenario, href. Not by the value. Just literally, if you have the attribute href, return that back to me. That's essentially what it's doing. Except for it's query selector, so it's only going to return back how many elements? One. Always just one. This thing here is returning back an element with an ID of M6P1, right? Once again, it's going to scour through the DOM until it finds it and then return back that element. These ones underneath here, they work a little differently. They are going to return back a node list containing all of the elements that match your query, right? So query selector all.content is going to return back all the elements that have the class content. The P1 will turn back all elements that contain a paragraph, or that is a paragraph. It'll return back all of them. And then the href one will return back all elements that contain an attribute called href. Any reason why I'm not query selecting an ID? Can you think of a reason why I wouldn't query selector an ID? Query selector all, sorry, an ID?
Because the ID is only one.
It should be, right. Do you know what happens if I query selector all an ID though? What will I get back? Will I get back an HTML element or a node list? How many people say an HTML element? Using query selector all, I'm using the ID as my CSS selector. Am I getting back a node list? Okay. Am I getting back an HTML element then? Okay. You are correct. It's Carlos, right? Why did I think it was Carlos? Because that's the name you gave me the last time. Yeah. You're Carlos from here on. So yeah, no, you're completely right though. It's a node list. It doesn't matter what you select with query selector all. It will always return back a node list. So it doesn't matter what I ask you. The answer is always a node list. It's never changes. If it's query selector, it's a single HTML element. Okay? I mean, the devil's in the details of the word all. Like, that's how you're going to remember. Cool. Go ahead and click execute. And you're going to see it spit out a whole bunch of garbage on the right-hand side there. But you should get past. What time did we start class at? 7? All right. We'll keep rocking for it a little bit longer. All right. Inspecting an element. Now, I don't know if you guys did this. Out of curiosity, how many of you had Scott for your HTML CSS class? No. Who did you have for HTML CSS? Jessica Gilfillan? Yeah. Okay. So I'm not sure if she showed you this, how to inspect an element to find it in your HTML page. Yep. That's very handy because you're going to use it in order to do different things. So inspecting an element, for those of you that don't know, you can actually right-click on an element on the page, and you can click Inspect, and it will show up in the DOM tree on the right side in your developer tools. So I clicked on Element, and it shows me the thing containing that word. Happens to be on this content tag that's there. Okay? Nested inside this H3 that's above it, right? So, I mean, there's really no other thing to teach besides that. So if you scroll down, go ahead and answer this. What HTML tag is the howdy button? And what is the value of the name attribute on the value button, on the howdy button? So you're going to have to right-click and inspect it, pull it open, and then take a look at and answer those two questions. And for those of you that think the howdy button is an actual button, I'm not a button. All right, that should have taken you like 10 seconds. What HTML tag is the howdy button? Sorry? Input, yep, it's an input. And what is the value of the name attribute on it? No, it's not howdy button. Yeah, this is button.
Like the value or the name?
The name attribute. So if you look right here, that's the name attribute.
Yeah, I thought it was looking for the value.
No, name attribute. Paste that in, click execute, you should get a pass on that. I mean, that was pretty easy. You guys already know how to inspect elements. But it's going to come crucial when you guys are working with other people's code, especially when things are changing and transferring on the page. It's very handy to know how to select an HTML element so that you can hopefully find it within your HTML code, right? Let's talk about DOM walking. DOM walking. DOM walking is basically, I think we need to illustrate it. Let's illustrate DOM walking. All right, I've got a body. I've got a header. I've got an H1. Right? I've got an article. And that article has a section. And that section has an H2. Right? This is my DOM. Okay? What DOM walking is I want to select this H2. So using CSS, I can walk my DOM. I can start with body. Okay? I'm going to move to header. Okay? Nope. You start with the parent, and you work your way down through the children. Yeah. Header. I don't need to select this guy. I want to get this guy. So I use the sibling selector. And I choose article. And then from article, I can go to section. And from section, I can go to H2. And that will return me back my H2 element. That is DOM walking, right? I start at body, and I move my way through the DOM till I get to the H2. These symbols, this is all children of parent, right? The difference between this and this, without this, this is all header elements in the body. Doesn't matter what level they're nested at, it's literally all header elements within the body, okay? This means only header elements that are nested directly underneath the body, the direct children of the body. This plus sign, it's called a sibling selector. What it means is, here's the header. Here's the header. Select the direct article sibling of the header. Again, another direct children, and we get to our H2. Did you guys learn about children selectors and sibling selectors? Kind of?
Makes sense. Like always the very.
Okay. Did you guys learn about this one? Did you learn about that guy? Okay, we're going to. Those of you who haven't, you will in about 30 seconds. All right, write the CSS selection string in this one that will select only the even elements. Hint, you will likely need to inspect to see what you're working with first. So inspect this element here. Take a look. This nth child is a hint for you. It's a pseudo selector that you're going to need. You only want to select the even elements. If you write the selector correctly and then click execute, they should turn, I think it's blue. I think it's the color that it spits out. I'll give you a few seconds there to figure it out. You're only writing a string. That's it, just a string, but with a selector in it. Kind of like Where's Waldo a little bit. I guess some of you guys can't see that side there. This is the thing you're going to need. Oh, that's not it. Let's go over here. All right. Step one, obviously, would be select any one of them and choose inspect so you can find out what it is, right? What kind of element is it? It's an li, right? Yeah, so it's a list tag. What's its parent? Yep, the ul. So we don't want to select every single ul on the page, right? Or every single li on the page. We only want to select those that ul with those li's. So let's write our quotes, right? First thing we should do is ul. How do I limit this ul to only that ul and not every other ul on the page? Yep, the ID. That's exactly what I was looking for. The ID, because it's the unique selector for me. It's M6P5SR, which stands for Module 6, Practice 5, Student Response. In case you were really curious. All right, how do I select all these LIs? LI. And this is where that unth child comes into play. Unth child, and write even inside of it. That's called a pseudo selector. There's also unth of type. There's after, before. There's a whole whack of them. There's tons and tons of them. I would definitely recommend looking. Oh, there's also not. Not is really handy. Not is a selector that basically says select all of these if they're not this. And then it will select all the things that are not that. Once you do that, you should be able to just go ahead and hit execute. And they should turn blue. Now, yes, that is CSS, but this CSS you need to know so that you can work with the JavaScript selectors, because you're using the actual CSS selector in order to query your DOM with JavaScript. All right, I'm going to scroll up a little bit. Nobody's yelling, so I'm assuming that's okay. So CSS DOM walking is a simple way for us to select elements that are nested deep within our actual DOM. You can use your CSS ninja skills, right, to access the hard-to-reach elements. However, CSS DOM walking, like many things in JavaScript, is not the only way to do this particular thing, right? The preferred way over this is actually to utilize something called DOM scope. We can use the DOM scope method, which is we select an element, then we query selector from it. And we're actually selecting from inside its scope, right? Obviously, an example makes more sense. But before we do that, does anybody need a break? Don't be shy if you do. It's fine. No? You guys just want to power through? You're hardcore. All right, let's do it. Okay. DOM walking with scope. The document object translates our entire HTML page. We figured that out, right? Anybody still unsure about that? No, you're all good. Takes that HTML page, converts it into an object, right? That object is made up of these little HTML elements, all representing our different HTML tags, right? The document object itself inherits from something called the node object. On the node object are our two methods that we keep using, query selector and query selector all. Obviously, that feels a bit like an overshare. Why do you need to know all that very intricate details? The reason is because document is not the only thing inheriting from the node object. Every single HTML element on the page inherits from the node object, meaning every single HTML element on the page has access to query selector and query selector all. So basically the way it works, I'm going to go back to, actually, you know what? I'm going to do it in an IDE because you guys are so spread out, it's impossible for everybody to see the board. So we'll just do it in an IDE. All right, here's Sublime. Make it super big, nice and senior size. Okay, so here's my body element, right? What do we do? Body, header, H1, article, header, H2. Actually, we think we had that in this section. Cool. On the outside of all of this, we also have head, and we have HTML. I'm going to take all of these, add these guys in, and wrapping all of that is document. When I call document.query selector, and I pass it an argument, it only can look through its children. That's where it gains access to. So if I say select body, it's going to go here and go, hey, are you the body? No. Are you the body? No. Are you the body? Yep. Cool, I found you. And then it returns it back and stores it into whatever I'm storing it into. I'm sure it does it more efficiently. It probably does it like a bubble search where it's using an index in order to quickly grab it. But that's essentially what's happening. It's querying the document, trying to find it. So things change if we start it here. It's going to now start from here and start querying down through this subsection, which means header is not going to return this element up here. It can't. It can't see it, right? Because it's not scoped to it. It's currently scoped to body. Again, we're not limited. If I put it here, which header am I going to return? Right, because it can only go through the children in this particular area. It can't see this header. Yeah.
So when you put it like right beside body, is it gonna find both headers?
Oh no, because it's query selector, how many does it return? One. And which one does it return? This one? Or yeah, the first instance. Yeah. So the first instance it finds will be the one it returns. The interesting thing that I don't know, what I don't know is, see how this goes body header, right? If I had no, hold on. I'm doing that wrong. Yeah. If I was to do article here, right? And then do header here. I don't know, I can't remember if it actually crawls through and returns, or if it does a shallow search, then next level shallow search, then next level shallow search. I can't remember that, but I'm pretty sure it's literally the first instance. It doesn't matter how far nested it is. I think it's pretty much the first instance. We can always test that at some point. But the point to understand right now is that this query selector is scoped to this block. It can't search up the block, right? So that's something that we can use to our advantage called DOM scoping, which means we can actually force our searches within a scope so that we're not reaching outside that scope, right? So we don't wind up grabbing LI tags that we don't want or grabbing header elements that are not a part of our actual need, right? So let's jump back to our browser because obviously I've got a little thingy for that. It's this one, DOM scope blocking. Step one, select and store only the UL element. So go ahead, right click on it, make sure you get this one. And I would recommend using that unique ID. I'll make your life a little easier. So for this one, you're going to have to do document.query selector. And pretty much Yeah, no, not pretty much. Always. You will always start with document.querySelector because you have to return back an HTML element. So you're always going to start with document.querySelector to at least get the first part of the chain, right? So we can do that together. So let's equals document, not in capital letters, document, wow, document.querySelector, which UL, hashtag, right? M6, P6, SR. And that will return back that UL element, the unique UL element, right? It's a little difficult to see. I'll zoom in a little bit here and crush this down a bit. Hold on. I'll scroll back to that. There you go. Is that better? Yep. Cool. Just note that this is wrapping to the next line. This is not on the next line. I didn't hit enter. It's just wrapping to the next line. I don't know why it does that. Like, it's just a little smaller. Come on, jump up. Up, 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 up. There we go. I did it. All right. So now using scope, select and store only the dot labels. So we start with what? Nope, we don't start with document. We're going to need query selector. But what are we going to call it on? UL. Because UL is now an HTML element. And it has query selector attached to it. It also has query selector all. But the benefit of this, and we're going to use query selector all for this one. The benefit of this is that we are scoped to the UL. So we don't have to worry that when we select dot labels, that it goes out and selects something that we don't want, right? It's not going to go select labels from another element because we are scoped within that UL. We can't go outside the UL, right? Same thing with this first class one. UL.querySelector all. Actually, I think it's not labels. I think it's just label. And the first class is it just dot first? You guys aren't looking at your query selector thingies, are you? All right, hold on. I will find out. Inspect. That's very difficult to see. Let's see here. No. It is first. Yeah, dot first. There we go. Cool. So if you selected those both correctly, when you click execute, this thing down here should execute. You should get a pass. And every first element should be orange. I'll give you a second to finish that up. I'll erase this board while you're doing that. Alrighty, anybody still typing? No? Alrighty, let's move on. So, working with an HTML element. We now should fully understand what HTML elements are, right? They are representations of our tags, right? So, anytime we have an HTML element, we are working with one of our tags. We're working with some element on the page. A singular element, not multiple. Just one element, right? All HTML elements have a property called text content that allows us to change the actual content inside. Not the HTML content, that is different. Just the text content. So if you access text content and try to store a paragraph tag in there, it's not going to work. It won't let you do it, okay? It will render it, but it's just going to render it literally. So if you write brackets P, it will list put brackets P out there. That's just how it works. All of them also have a property called value. However, it's only really beneficial on form elements, like inputs, buttons, text area, stuff like that. Anything that actually takes a value, that's the only time that it's important. That's obviously important to you for your assignments because you have to retrieve the value out of the input field, and you also need to retrieve the text content of both the guess limit and the score. So you need to know these two things. So if we want to change our text content, all we do is access that property like we would access any property on an object and change its value. That's it. Just like you do with any property on an object. It's no different. Just this one has a name called text content. That's the only difference. So you take a look at here. Here's my wonderful phrase, the falcon flies south in the winter. And then I have an input field with a value already in it that says falcons suck. And down here, I've written some of this stuff for you already. Falcon P is query selectoring and accessing the falcon text. And then the second one, the input, is accessing the falcon input. And both are being stored into variables. Okay, so falcon P is a paragraph tag that's getting stored. And falcon input is the input field. All right. When we want to actually see what content is in them, all we have to do is access that particular property. So if you access falconp.textContent, you should see the falcon flies south in the winter. And if you access console log falcon input.value, you should see falcons suck. If you change this, you will see whatever you've changed it to. Okay? So if you click execute, hold on, let me go over to the console. This is becoming very difficult to work with. Hold on. Ugh. There, much better. Now I can see things. I can see clearly now. Here we go. Execute, and you should see, it's terribly hard to read. The falcon flies south in the winter, and falcons suck. That's what you should see. Yeah, there's an error there because we haven't finished off the rest of the stuff, right? You're not missing the value to falcon P correctly. You're not assigning, the value to falcon P correctly. Try falcon P text content equals value, right? So that's what we're going to do next. Step 1. Using a simple assignment operator, modify the falcon P text. Now, don't tell me I never taught you how to do this, because I did. When we did objects, I taught you how to assign values to properties. That's all you're doing. You're just assigning a value to a property. Just make sure the property you assign the value to is called, with a capital C, .text content. That's the property you're accessing for the first one. So go ahead and do that now. Change it to whatever you want, string, number, function definition, doesn't really matter. Well, maybe not a function definition. I think it needs to be a string, actually. For those of you that are stuck, falcon P is our object, right? .text content is a what? Just a property. It's just a property on the object falcon P. It just has strange magical powers that when you change its value, it will actually modify the value on the page. But that's based on the fact that it's because of referencing. All right, so what you should have hopefully written was falcon P with a capital dot text content. What's the rest of it? Cool. What are we going to make the value? I'm going to write Gagan deep says, hey there. There you go. Did I spell it right?
Yes.
All right. If you click execute, it should change it. Yep, sure enough. Let's go ahead and change the value. Falcon input dot text content. Oh, nice catch. Value equals boo, raka, cha. I don't even know where I picked that up from. I've been saying it for years, and I don't know where it came from. Makes me think of Mortal Kombat, though, and Mortal Kombat's out this week. Or not this week. It's coming soon. All right, go ahead and click execute. And Goggandeep says, hey there. And we have Boo Raka Cha. We've got everything we need. Now, incidentally, just that little bit of information, you could take the value here and change the value here. Right? Just access this one first, then modify the text content in this one with the value of this one. That's all you need to do. So if you want to know how to do that, you come down here. All you would have to do is go falcon p.textContent equals falcon input.value. That's it. Right? Then when you click execute and your mouse doesn't do stupid things, there we go. See? Boo raka cha, boo raka cha. And you can get even better, right? Because we have this wonderful thing, right? The backticks. Those things are so awesome because they give us string interpolation, right? This is what you guys should be doing all the time. There we go. We can write Sean likes to say execute. Sean likes to say boo raka cha. I can change that. Hey there. Execute. Sean likes to say boo raka. Oh, I did something goofy. Oh, yep, nope. We have to turn that one off. There we go. Now if we say, hey there. Execute. Sean likes to say hey there. And even better, in 3 weeks, when we learn how to do event binding, you can actually make it so as you type in here, it changes the value of there as you're typing, right? Which is pretty cool. But yeah, we want to end early. I won't do that. Okay, changing styles. We now know how to change text content. We know how to change the value. That stuff's easy. Changing styles, we've done this once before. Incidentally, style is only one property, right? There's several properties. Style is actually an attribute property on your tag element. That's what they're known as an attribute. When you guys did HTML, hopefully Jessica talked about attributes. Just as a refresher, attributes are like your href tag, right? That's an attribute. The name, ID, class, those are all attributes, right? The data attribute, which when you guys start working out in the industry, and if you're working with JavaScript, you will make heavy use of the data attribute because it's a one way to be able to transfer information back and forth. It's a very, very reliable and handy thing to have. It also helps you kind of keep state because you can store stuff inside of it and the user can't change it really. So that's the cool thing about that. But anyway, so those are attributes and we have access to those. But the one that we want to play with is called style. And we can access the style attribute, which we've already done, right? We can do this down here under the style me. So this is the thing we're going to style here. So your first step is to access that element, right? Do we know what that element is right now? How are we going to find out? Exactly. So go ahead and inspect it. And then somebody walk me through how to select it. What's the first part? Yeah, but there's one piece before that. I need the object. Yes, document. Then query selector. And then what's my selecting string? Yep, styling. but we're missing something. I need something in this so that it knows to select from it.
Div hashtag styling.
Okay, we could do that. We could do div hashtag styling, or we could just do hashtag styling. It's totally up to you, right? But don't forget this hashtag part, because the hashtag's what tells the query selector it's an ID. Yeah.
So it's like instead of a document, we can use a Windows. Query selector.
No, I don't think so, because I don't think, if I'm correct, I don't think window actually has, window doesn't inherit from node. That's the problem, or element. So we can find out though. Anytime you have a question like that, if you want to know, type in window, type dot, start to type out the actual name of the method, and if it's not coming up, you can always complete it though. Just hit enter, it's undefined. Yeah. Now if we want it to be a part of it, we can actually write it. We can do window.prototype dot query selector equals function, and I'll just write something stupid. Console.log, hey, look, ma, no hands. There we go. Bam. Cannot set property query selector if undefined. Interesting. Window doesn't have a prototype either. So, no, you can't do anything to window. Yeah. Kind of makes sense, actually. It's like you also, I don't think you can do this. So document, most important thing in the whole bloody DOM. Without the document, you have no DOM, right? Uh-oh. Let's see if that actually worked. Yeah, you see it won't let you do it. Which would make sense, because you'd just crash the whole page, right? Be totally useless after that point. All right. God, we get sidetracked pretty good. Okay, so we have styling, const style me, document.query selector, hashtag styling, hashtag styling. This is an example of how to change a style. So if you go ahead and click execute, so there's the style me tag, right? Click execute. Ooh, we have a border, right? So now, because of the border, you should be able to do step 2. Use this as your example, right? And then go ahead and change the background color of the style me. Should be fairly easy. We're done, aren't we? Ready to go? All right. What's the object I'm working with? Yeah, style me. What's the property I want? Style. And what property do I want from style? Background color. Sure. You could also do background. That would work too. Equals, what color are we going with? Pink. That's what Monday said. Monday said pink. Click execute. Ooh, it's pink. Oh no, it totally matters. If I write U and spell it the British Commonwealth way and hit execute, oh, that's pretty cool. That's new. They didn't used to support that. That's pretty cool. Nice. Actually, that's the second time I found something like that this week. You guys in, not the summer, in September, we'll be taking advanced JavaScript classes, right? And you get to play with Node. And there's this package manager called NPM. And NPM, people like to spell install like this, which is isn't-all, right? ISNTALL. And because so many people spell install this way, NPM wrote an alias for the function, so that will actually work. They do like 6 different common misspellings and they all work. It's pretty funny. All right, cool. I mean, color with an O-U-R is not a misspelling. Change the font color. Okay, so go ahead, change your font color, right? At this point, it should be old hat. You should know how to do this with your eyes closed. I don't know. How many of you can type with your eyes closed? Like legit, like legibly? Yeah? Just a couple of you? Yeah?
I can type with my eyes closed. Style. Dot. What am I working with though? What is it? Font. No, I need to look now. Oh, I need color. Yeah. There we go. I wonder if UR will work in this one. Let's go aqua. Hashtag what? BADA55. That's cool. I did not know. It didn't change anything. Or if it did, I can't see it.
It's not color. Like you.
Right. Oh, maybe it's not supported. Oh. So background color with a U is supported, but color with a U is not supported.
That's right.
Yeah. But we could always change that. HTML. Element. Dot prototype. Dot style. Dot color with a U equals HTML element dot prototype dot style dot color without a U. Darn it! I'll figure it out and I'll get back to you. It is definitely plausible. All right. Step 4, change border radius. All right. Border radius is pretty easy too. I'm sure you've picked up the fact that
All of the things that we're doing for styles are all done by just camel casing the words. But you don't have to camel case if you don't want to.
you can write it.
Like a regular style would be written.
You just have to wrap it in square brackets. Type 3 times and almost typed Raiden 3 times. I definitely want to play Mortal Kombat. All right,
Style, border radius. This is the equivalent to using the shortcut that they had before. It definitely looks better though. Dot border radius looks better than that. But that is completely fine. And we did talk about that, right? With objects. You have an object. Here's my object. Here's A. A is equal to 5. Right? Let's make X equal to this. Okay? I can access A by doing X dot A. Or I can access A by doing X, square bracket, put A in quotes. That is also a way to access A. And you will do both. Because as you're dynamically processing stuff, and if you don't necessarily know the property, you'll need to know how to do it that way as well. So you can take a string.
anyways, I'm going to change that back because I don't like it. Border radius equals, I'm going to go 25 pixels. Should make a little pill. Yep, it's pill-shaped. And you should get a pass. I really want to center that. Looks terrible. I'm just going to write one more style just because it's annoying me. Style me dot style dot. Is it text align? Text align equals center. That should work. Oh yeah. Text align. Cool. All right. Do you need a break now? Somebody said sure. Who said sure? Okay. Why don't we take 10 minutes then, or 15?
10? Okay, let's take 10 minutes. Go get food, go get drinks, do whatever you need to do. Yeah.
Oh, just,
Yeah, I'll come give you a hand. Yeah. Anybody needs a hand, I'll be kicking around here. So. There we go. That'd be better.
All right, appending and prepending HTML elements. This is what allows you to take an element and move it to another location on the screen. This is something you will do quite often. So think of it this way, for example. How many of you have gone to a website, you click a button, and a little thing opens up, right? The modal. You guys have heard of modals or pop-ups. Yeah, sometimes they call them pop-ups. those little modals, I call them modals because that's what Bootstrap calls them. Bootstrap calls them modals, right? Those little modals that are popping up, that's exactly what's happening. It's us grabbing the element and appending it now to the body so it's in front of you and showing it to you at that time. We unhide it. When you're done with it, we remove it from where it is and put it back where it was. That's how that basic functionality works out. However, we're going to show the simplest version of append and prepend. What we're going to do is we're going to take these two elements that you see over here and we're going to move them over here. And I've already done that for you. So I've selected, I can wait. That's totally fine. All right. I've already selected the two divs for you, the two containers. This one's called start. This one's called end. Okay, they're already selected for you. I've already selected the two elements inside. This one's first. This one is second. And I've even done the first move for you. So if you hit execute, they'll move over to the other box. Okay? So here's what you're going to do. You're going to move them back to the other box. That's what you need to do. So using code, using append or prepend, the correct element that you need to call that on, move first and second element back to the other box in the order that it tells you to. No pressure, but Monday did this in about 15 seconds. Do, 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 do. Sorry. All right. Anybody do it? Ready? Yeah? Nice. Okay. Walk me through it. Start. I like how it was in unison. It was like Simon and Garfunkel. Start. Yep. Prepend. Okay. Second.
And then after that, start dot append.
Cool. And if that's correct, we get passed and they've moved over. Cool. So append and prepend have more power than this. What you don't realize that is happening here is we're not moving the words move me to and move me over there. We're moving the whole HTML element. We're taking it out of the DOM, we're putting it into space, we're shoving it over, and then reattaching it back into the DOM again. That's what's happening. So this very little tiny bit of code is doing a lot because it's moving your DOM elements from one location to another. Incidentally, you already experienced this. Where'd it go? Nope. Right here. When you take an element here and you drag it and you move it, what I'm doing in the background, I detect your drag. I say, cool, that's your element. I now know which one you're moving. I'm going to take that and store the reference. Where are you? Okay, you're here. I'm now going to append that to that location. And that's all I do. I just keep taking your element as you drag it, and I append it, and append it, and append it. And I'm moving your DOM element up and down through that list just by using append. So really cool things you can do with append. Made even cooler if you get to things like animation. All right, cool. That's append and prepend. God, we're just powering through this. Now let's talk about node lists. Up to this point so far, we've been working with singular HTML elements, right? Every time we use query selector, we get back how many elements? One. Always one. And it's always what kind of element? HTML element. It's always an HTML element, right? If I use query selector all, I'm getting back one or many elements, and they are always will be a node list. Thanks for playing my game. It will always be a node list. Node lists, you can think of them like an array, right? Filled with HTML elements. But it can be one or many HTML elements. It can also be empty, okay?
So that's something to keep in mind. When you use query selector all, it will be returning back a node list, and I have seen this, and it's kind of an issue for a lot of students when they start with this assignment that you're working on. They'll use query selector all and then not understand why they can't get the value from the input. And the reason is because you're basically saying, imagine you have 6 inputs on the page, right? So I've got input 1 here, right? And I've got input 2, right? That's essentially what a node list is. And then you're saying dot value. And the interpreter's response to that is, which one? Which one do you want? Because this is arbitrary. I have no idea what you want, right? Just pick one. That's what it wants you to do. And you can, right? You can easily pick one, give it an index number. That works, right? You can pick it that way. You can iterate through it and then get each value if that's what you wanted to do. There's a lot of things you can do, but keep in mind that a node list with dot query selector all will always return a node list. So you will have to parse it or select the index that you want. Okay? Query selector, when you're selecting your input on the page in your assignment, you're going to use query selector because it will return back just that instance of that input. All right, let's play with some node lists. Cool. Select all the paragraph tags on the page. So I'll give you a second. Go ahead and give it a go. All right? Go ahead and select all the paragraphs on the page. Okay. Oh, super insanely oversized. Oh, wrong thing. Need this. All right. What does my syntax look like? Okay, document dot query selector all. Yep, that's literally it. Just P. Just P. Every single paragraph on the page, just a P. That's it. I mean, if you really wanted to, you could do body.p or body space P, but I mean, that's just overkill for no reason. However, the more specific you get, the more efficient you make query selector. Does that make sense? So if you're like, think of it like a database, right? If you're like, select all people with the initial S. Well, that's a huge query. It has to power through the whole database looking for people with the initial S. But if you're like, select all people with the initial S who were born between December and January, or January and December, no, sorry, that's dumb, between November and December, then it will know to reduce it down to just that month selection, and you now reduce down the query, right? It's the same thing with this. If you're like, select all P tags within the body, then it knows to reduce it down to just the body. Well, the body's the whole bloody page, right? So it would be even better if it was article, because that would actually refine it down to only P tags within the article. That means it's not going to start at the body and go through as children, because it doesn't need to. It's going to start right at article and work its way through article. Right? Anyways, that's how you can make it more efficient. We'd have to find benchmarking software in order to see how much more efficient, like how many microseconds we actually shave off. All right, step 2. Iterate and change the color of the text in each paragraph to a different color from black. Now, we have 2 options to us. We actually have 3 options.
It's 4 options. 5.
6.
Yeah, actually, no, 5. 5 options available to us. 5 different options to iterate through this. We can iterate with the for each, which uses a callback. We could iterate with a for loop, a standard for loop, and use .length to tell how many elements we have, and then do that old thing. We could use one of the ES5 for loops, which is for of. Remember I showed you guys for of. It allows you to iterate through an array. It just returns back each element from the array. We can use a while loop, and we can use a do while loop, right? However, I'm going to use the for of loop because I just like it. It's clean. It's kind of easy to work with. You can't use const here, even though we're pulling back an element, because the loop will constantly assign the new element to the variable. You're changing the variable's value each time. So you can't go const L because it won't work. It'll just break. So you're going to use let L of PS, right? So just as if you were iterating through an array. No difference. Exactly the same as if we were iterating through an array. And I mean, change the color of the text in each paragraph to a different color from black. Go, do that. You already know how to do that. We did that further up. Logic is the same. Logic doesn't change. Right? What object are we working with? What's the name of the object? What's that? Nope. That's the property. Inside our for loop, what object are we working with? L. And then what property? Style. And what property of style? No, just color. Yeah. Equals. Give me a color. Red. All right. It's literally going to change every paragraph on the page to red. All right. Blue. Hit execute. And there you go. All of it is blue. It's like a Superman blue and red there now. It's pretty cool. But I mean, what kind of person would I be if we didn't do it the hard way too, right? I promised we were going to type lots and lots of callbacks, and we are definitely going to type a callback, all right? So let's do the callback version. It's PS, right? That's the node list. Node list has a method on it called for each. So we'll do dot for each. And for each takes a callback. What is a callback? In the simplest of terms, what is a callback? Looking for a structure. Let's think of all the data types we have. What data type is a callback? So we have arrays, we have objects, we have numbers, strings, right? Undefined and null are technically their own, right? Booleans, and we have function. Thank you. It's a function. So we can do this in two ways. We can either define the function outside as a named function, or we can write it right inside. If I'm going to write it right inside, I'm not going to use a named function. I'm going to use a what? Has no name. So it is anonymous. It's anonymous. Those of you that have worked with lambdas, that's what you want to be thinking here. For each is doing something very cool under the hood. For each under the hood is its own function. And it's literally going to call our anonymous function for us. That's what basically happens under the hood. So it's going to do one of these things. And don't worry, we're actually going to see this quite in depth in a few seconds here. We call PS dot for each, right? Then we have this, and this takes a function definition inside of it. For each is a function. Let's take a look at what for each will look like. For each will basically be a for loop, essentially, right? There'll be a for loop,
And it's going to go through each of the elements inside of our PS. And the way it's going to do that is it's going to do the same kind of let thing that we were doing before. Let x of PS, just the same thing we wrote before, right? Same thing we wrote on lines 5 to 7. But it's not going to go through PS. It needs to reference this. What's that wonderful keyword we use to reference the owner object? This. In the end, we got there. All right. So this. So now we have an x value for each one. It's going to iterate through. This thing is called callback. We'll say, right? That's the name of our function. Inside here, it's literally going to go callback. Like that. It's going to pass x. And then it's going to finish off its thing. So let's see what's happening. For each, blah, blah, blah. Ignore the for each part. The for loop. We get the first element of x. We call our function. We get the next element of x. We call our function. And we keep doing this with each element till we finish and complete our for loop, and then we exit out of our function. That's what's happening underneath the hood when we pass this anonymous function in here. This anonymous function that you see right here is what's getting called right here. That anonymous function is this callback. So whatever logic you put in there, that's what's happening. In addition, you have access to this. How? How do you get access to that? Type x in as a parameter. What's happening now, this is coming here and getting shoved into this callback. And once again, the callback is merely that. It's that anonymous function. That value gets passed into there each time, and you now have it available to you. Which means, first iteration, I have whatever the first element of the PS is, which will be a P tag, obviously. And each time I keep getting a brand new P tag that I can work with. The rest of the logic inside is exactly the same. Just copy, paste, change this to X. Let's go from blue to, I don't know. Colors are hard. It's gray? Sure, gray. Oh, is it AY or EY? You say, but I don't know. Oh yeah, it's EY. Cool. Callbacks are hard. Trust me, it took me years and years to finally master callbacks. I now understand them at a level that makes me feel super smart sometimes, but they are hard. And passing information up and down through a callback is very difficult, but when you master callbacks, there's kind of a cool secret that a lot of people don't know. Many languages support callbacks. Like, many languages do. PHP supports callbacks. Java supports callbacks. JavaScript, obviously. C++, very mid-level language, supports callbacks. So callbacks are super cool. Sometimes they're not called callbacks. Sometimes they're called lambdas. Okay? Lambdas and callbacks, essentially the same thing. All right? It's a function that calls a function. You ready for something super fun? We are going to override, a prototypal method using callbacks, and we're going to basically make it so that node lists gain a method that is only available on arrays called filter. So let me explain to you what filter does. I'll show you an example, kind of. All right. This is an array, right? No, I want to do something nice and easy. Let's do 1, 3, 78, 4, 6, 91, 345. Okay? I'm going to call dot filter. Filter takes an anonymous function, or any function actually. And once again, we can pass a parameter in here, whatever parameter we want. We'll just call it x. And that's basically our structure. Here's what's happening under the hood. The first time it gets fired off, 1 will be passed to that function. Next time, 3 will be passed to that function. Next time, 78 will get passed to that function. So each time as we go through our array, each one of those elements gets passed to that function, and we can now work with that inside here. What filter is expecting to do is to either return true or false. It's always going to return a Boolean, because what it wants to know is, do you want that element or do you not want that element? Hence the word filter, right? So what we can do is we can say return x modulo 2 equals 0. What does that say? Right? What does modulo do? Right? So if it's equal to 0, basically what am I saying? Yeah, if it's even, then return it. If it's not, then don't. This is going to return this statement, x%2 equals 0. This statement, why don't we wrap it so that you can easily see it. That statement is going to return what data type? Is it going to return a number? No, it won't. It will not be a number. Won't be a string. No, no, we're not getting into, yeah, no. I mean, like, doubles and stuff do technically exist in JavaScript, but you don't use them. Yeah. It's going to return a Boolean, right? And the reason it is, this is what's returning your Boolean. That's what is doing it. That evaluation tells the interpreter that our return response is a Boolean. Because we're making a comparison. We're comparing the result of x modulo 2 to 0. That's what we're comparing, right? Sometimes brackets, brackets definitely make things more readable, right? That makes it a lot easier to see what's happening, yeah? X modulo 2 equals 0. So that's going to return what for the first element? True or false? Right? Second element? Third? It's all if you're fucking with me. The fourth element? True. Fifth, true. Sixth, false. Seventh, false. Exactly. So when it's done, it'll have returned 78, 4, 6, and that's it. Right? That's the only elements we will actually get from that. I'm going to copy this. Pop over to my browser, pop over to my console, and hit enter, and you can see that that's true. We got 74, 4, and 6. Now, why is that important to know? This is an array method. Node lists are not arrays. Even though they look like arrays, they seem to function like an array. You can call .length on them. You can call for each on them. You can iterate through them. They feel like an array. You access elements from it using indexes if you want to. Everything feels like an array. However, if you call, let's do a query selector, all, pass in a P, and I call filter on it, you can see what I get is undefined. And the reason is because it doesn't have that method available to it. Because it isn't an array. It may act like an array, but it isn't. It's a node list. It's not an array. Array, believe it or not, is just an object. See? An array is an object in JavaScript. Array has prototype on it, which means methods can be bound to array. You can actually add your own new array methods if you want to. Node list is no different. Node list is also an instance of object, and node list also has a prototype. And because of that, what we can do is we can take the same functionality that is built on the array filter, take that concept, and apply it to node list. so that we can filter HTML elements if we so choose. Okay? So first, let me show you the easy way to do this. Here I have a method. I've selected all the LIs on the page, every single LI under the ULM6P7SR, which is basically these guys right here, right? And I want to call filter on them. I've got my callback. I'm doing it the exact same way we would do in an array, right? And I'm assuming, as a new JavaScript programmer, this is going to work because node lists seem like arrays. They feel like arrays. I click execute, and sure enough, I get a wonderful error saying lis.filter is not a function, meaning that function is not available to it, right? So now I'm left a little confused. What's the easiest way for me to deal with this? The easiest way for me to deal with this is to do array.from and wrap it. Click execute, and now I've filtered it. Okay? That's the easiest way. There's a couple of problems with this. One, .from is ES7, which means it's not very standard across the board. In browsers, it will break and not work. So you can't rely on it because it's as old as 2017, which means it's 2 years old, right? It's doing some heavy magic underneath the hood. It's not very efficient. It's not very optimized. But at least it does give us array-type kind of processes. However, it's not the best. The other thing, the biggest negative to this, the absolute most massive negative side to this, I don't get a node list back. I'll show you what I mean. Let's take X. I'm going to console.log x.constructor.name. Execute, and as you can see, I get an array. So I gave it a node list, but it returned me an array. Programming 101. If I give you something, I'm expecting the same type to come back, right? If I give you a student, you need to return the student. If I give you this class, you need to return this class. It's common. That's what you want. If I give you a node list, I don't want an array back. I want a node list because there's things that node lists can do that arrays can't do. So I want to maintain what I have. In order to do that, though, I'm going to have to write my own filter function for node lists. That's the only thing I can do is write my own from scratch. Now I have all these steps here, but based on Monday's class, it was such a huge pain in the butt to write them that way. So go ahead, select all those steps up to line 9 and hit delete. Okay? Just do it. All those steps and hit delete. It'll make your life mucho easier, trust me. Let's write a new comment. Like the badasses we are, we're making our own filter method. Booyah, boo rakacha. There you go. All right. We're going to take advantage of something we learned last week. We're going to take advantage of prototypal inheritance, and we're going to create our own filter function on an existing library function. We're going to take an existing library object and write a whole new method that will now be available to us on any node list that comes back. That's the cool thing about it. Because LIs is inheriting from a node list object, whatever method we add to that prototype immediately becomes available to those LIs, automatically. First, we need to select the object we want to mess around with, right? Want to mess around with node list? We need to write node list first. Now I just said it. If I want to add a method onto the node list that is inherited by its children, what property do I need to add the method to? Starts with a P. Sounds like a dangerous robot. E-R-O. There we go. In the end, we got there. Prototype. And we wanted do the same thing that the array one does, so I don't think we should change the name. I think we should keep it as filter. Equals. Incidentally, do not use arrow functions if you write these type of prototypal methods. Arrow functions maintain the context of this. If you write an arrow function here, for those of you that know how, if you were to write an arrow function here, this is not node list. This is window, which means it'll mess everything up. So you need to write a standard anonymous function. Okay. Function is going to need a callback in it. I'm going to call it callback. You can call it Steve. You can call it literally whatever you want. It is just a symbol name. I'm going to create some distance down here so this moves up the page a little bit. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see a little better. There you go. We're going to do something we haven't done yet. It's a DOM method that we're going to learn about after the break when we come back from our midterm and our reading week. It's called create document fragment. Essentially what it does is, I don't know. Anyways, you know our DOM, right? It's our representation of our page, correct? Document fragment exists outside of that and is just kind of floating in free space. When we create a document fragment, we can do things with it like we would use with a DOM element, but it's not a part of the DOM page. We don't have to worry about the user seeing it. We can do whatever we need to do and then throw it away when we're done. Okay? So it's kind of convenient, and that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to create a temporary holder for our node list because when we're done, we want to return a node list. We don't want to return an array. But in order to do that, I'm going to have to kind of use and abuse document fragment here. When we're done, we'll call it an Uber. Send it on its way. It's kind of harsh. I'm sorry, document fragment. All right. Now we can go ahead and loop through, just like you would loop through anything, right? Standard loop for let, and you can call this variable whatever you want. I'm going to call mine node because it just seems to make sense to me, of this. And what is this? It's this thing. This is node list. This is the owner object. This is always the owner object. We're going to write a small condition in here. If callback node. And don't worry, I'm going to explain this. The bang operator here, the exclamation mark, does anybody know what that means? Exactly, not. It means not. So it means if this thing is falsy, but this thing is true, but reverse it, right? So it's basically saying if that thing is not true, if that thing returns, actually not even false, if that thing returns undefined, null, or false, any of those three values, then that will break. That logic inside will execute. And basically what we want to do is call continue. Continue, does anybody know what continue does? Yeah, it jumps to the next iteration. It jumps through the loop and into the next iteration, which will result in our node that we're working with not getting returned back. We're going to skip it. Hence the filtering, right? Now we're filtering through. So our callback should be returning what value? Our callback should return back what type of data type? What did the callback in the array filter to return? A Boolean, right? It needs to return a Boolean in order for us to fail on it. So let's write the rest of it. The else will encompass if the callback returns a true value. And if that happens, we're going to use that handy method we learned today, append, and we're going to append it to our node list. And we're almost done. Incidentally, you're writing metaprogramming here. That's what you're doing right now. You are all currently graduated to metaprogrammers. This is the type of stuff that metaprogrammers do all the time. In our system, we had a JavaScript programmer that was really, really skilled. And this type of stuff is all over the place, all through our system. All right, last piece. We need to return something. And like I said before, we're not going to return an array. We're going to return a node list. Almost, we want to return the children from it. Oh, no, sorry, it's child nodes. Child nodes, that's what it is. Got to stop hitting Control S. And what that will return back is a node list. All right. I'll go over this really fast. This is our object that we're starting with. This is an object that is a part of the DOM API. This is a part of your browser's API. It's an ES standard specification object that exists on all browsers. They have to have it. It's called node list. It's an object that you don't have control over, you didn't make, right? Sorry, you have control over it, but you didn't make it. Prototype accesses the inheritance, right? It allows us to access the inheritance chain of the node list, meaning we can now create our own methods or our own properties on this actual object. So we do. We create a new method called filter. I only know it's a method because we're making it equal to a function, right? Our function is going to take a callback. A callback is a function. It's a function that's going into a function, right? We're going to create a variable called node list, and we're going to store in something called a document fragment. The document fragment is merely just a chunk of DOM that isn't actually a part of our working DOM, right? It's just floating around in free space. We're going to use it and abuse it and call it an Uber when we're done, because we're just getting it to get us back a node list. That's all we care about, is that we get a node list back. Now we're going to do a loop. We're going to node of this. This is this object, which means because this is a list, this is iterable. We can iterate through it just like an array. We're going to take each element and assign it into a throwaway variable called node. Then we're going to pass it to our callback as an argument. Okay? This callback that we're doing here is basically just looking for a false response, whether it's false, undefined, or null. If it's any of those three things, we're going to call continue, which will literally just say do nothing and go to the next iteration of the loop. Otherwise, we're going to append our node to our node list document fragment. When we're done, we want to return the node list, so we literally called node list.childNodes. I don't expect you to know this. This is not going to be on a midterm. This is merely for fun. We're overloading. Cynthia does not find this fun. But we are merely overloading a node list property. That's it. If you click execute, it's going to say passed and everything's working. And now we can use this bad boy. So let's use it now. In fact, I think we might have access to it. We might have access to it over here, which would be pretty cool. Oh yeah, we do. Nice. All right, cool. So instead of, messing up our stuff over here, why don't we grab some LIs, do a document.query selector. Sorry, this thing pops up every time I type anything. Query selector all. We'll grab all the LIs on the page. Okay. So now I've got every single LI on the whole page. And I want to filter this LI list. So let me see. Inspect. Do you have anything on you that's unique? Well, you have a child, so we'll use that. All right. We've got our LIs. We're going to grab back all the links. There's all our LIs, right? So now we can call lis.filter, and it's available to us. It wouldn't be available to us before, right? And I can see that if I hit enter, there's our function that's on our node list. lis.filter. Need to give it a callback. Need to make sure that it can pass each li to something. So I'm going to just type in li there. There we go. Now I'm in here and I can do whatever I want. What does my filter have to return? What type of data? A Boolean. Wow. Has to return a Boolean, right? True or false every single time. So we need to do some sort of condition. I basically want to see, I want all the LI elements that have the link property on them, right? If they have a link class on them, then I want it back. So unfortunately, it's got a child in it called span. I need to access that particular thing in order to do that. So in order to do that, I'm going to do, I'll write let child equal li dot query selector dot link. There we go. Now that will return that for me. And I'm basically going to say if child return true, else return false. That's very shorthand, and I do apologize. I know it's hard to read shorthand, but cool. All these LIs currently in this list all have the link property on them, or they have a child node with a link. And our filter works. So that prototypal overriding that we did can be done to any object, any element that's on there right now, right? Today, for example, I overrode stringify on objects, so I could actually print out an object as a string, including its function definitions, which it didn't support before. That is a very handy thing to do, and yes, it is something that you should be able to become familiar with because it extends back to our object inheritance class from last week. So between that and this class, you should hopefully be able to start writing your own prototypal methods. What I will say, I find the biggest thing with new programmers, they're afraid they're going to break their computer. That's the big thing that I think people seem to get a fear of. You're not going to break your computer with JavaScript. It's not going to happen. There's nothing you can do. You can't access your power settings. You can't access your PCIe port and like crash out your GPU. You don't have C-level type of performance actions with JavaScript, at least not in the client. Okay? So try things. If you find yourself asking the question, can I do X? Do it. Just do it. Just give it a go. If worse comes to worse and you wind up in an infinite loop, the most you're going to do is crash your browser. That's it. So you just right-click on it, kill it, right? That's all you need to do. Get over that fear, and you'll become a very powerful programmer quickly, right? Just get over that particular fear. Anytime you find yourself asking the question, can I do this? Just do it. Just give it a go, because that's how you're going to find out, right? All right, so that's it for that. One thing just before we go, quickly, to GCS. This is posted. Here's the midterm practice. It's not completed. I will add more to it over the weekend. These things are auto-generated and they're random, so your neighbor will not get the same set of numbers, or it's very unlikely that they will get the same set of numbers as you. So you guys can, work on it, and if you want, you can do this multiple times. You just click me, and you can clear the test and do it again if you so choose. It will save to local storage, so if you refresh your page or leave it, you can come back to it and resume it. That's totally fine, as long as you don't click the click me. Go ahead, go through the different pieces in here. Do your best to try to see what you can do. Use it as practice. The only things that are not completed currently are probably the things you want completed the most, are objects, which I will do on Saturday, and I will upload on Saturday. Object constructors, inheritance, and the DOM things that we talked about today. So all of that will be pushed on Saturday, and then you guys can go ahead and take a round out of that on Saturday. If you want, you can also click the Get Code button. I'll put a link up, and if you complete the midterm, I'll give you 1%. Like that's like, so you can get 101 in this class. So like 1% is pretty significant. Looks so depressed. You're just like, no, I don't want 1%. Anyway, so I'll give you 1% if you actually complete that, all right? So kind of like a quiz that you would have normally had, but there's no quiz this week. But it's totally up to you. Do it or don't do it, I don't care. Any questions about the midterm for next week? No? If you do have any questions, please feel free to contact me on Slack, right? Best place to contact me. Other than that,